watching this instruction tape. The first step was when you purchased a Mr. Squirrel squirrel whistle. My name is Walt Grayson, and for the next several minutes, we'll be discussing how to call and use the Mr. Squirrel whistle, when to use the whistle, and different situations you may encounter in the woods when using this call. And to explain this unique method of calling squirrels, we have Shannon Talkington and Jerry Seaman. Both of these outdoorsmen have spent years in the squirrel woods, many of those years successfully perfecting the techniques you're about to hear. Now first, I'd like for Shannon to explain the principle behind the Mr. Squirrel whistle and why you believe it's so successful in attracting squirrels.
The squirrel whistle imitates the distressed cry of a baby squirrel, like a predator such as a hawk or an owl has caught the little squirrel and is killing it. That's how we actually came up with this. We saw a hawk one day grab a young squirrel and take him to the ground, and as he was killing the baby squirrel, the squirrel was making a whistling sound. The hawk was flashing his wings trying to hold his balance, and at that time, squirrels went to barking all around us.
That's right. The sounds that you make with the squirrel whistle plus the other sounds that we throw in sound just like this hawk attack that Shannon is telling you about. And the reason we think the squirrels respond to it by chattering and running up and down limbs is it is their instinct to protect their young ones from predators. And when they hear what they think is a predator attacking their young squirrel, they'll try to distract it away from the young one by making a lot of noise, barking and chattering, by creating a lot of movement by running up and down tree limbs.
So, Shannon, what you're saying then is that squirrels respond by barking and running up and down tree limbs?
That's right. When they hear this call, they will go to barking, running up and down a tree limb, and a lot of times move towards your location. There's been several occasions when I've made my call and had squirrels right over my head and come down barking. Even though they could see me, they would still be barking at me.
Well, now you've described some of the basic reactions you get from using the Mr. Squirrel whistle. Now, Jerry, tell us how to use the whistle.
First off, Walt, let me make this point. The hunter should attach the lanyard that comes with the whistle to the whistle. The whistle must be sucked on to make the right sound, and with the lanyard attached, there's no way you can swallow the whistle. Also, it makes it harder to lose the whistle. Okay, now, when the whistle is placed in the mouth between the teeth and the lips and sucked on, it will make this sound. This is really a very simple call to make. The main thing that you have to do when you suck on the whistle to get the proper sound is make sure that you're not sucking any air around the whistle, and also don't suck too hard on the whistle. If you suck too hard, you'll actually diminish the volume of the whistle. What we're trying to do is make a soft whistle that sounds just like a baby squirrel. Also, there are some other sounds that we like to make while we're sucking on the whistle. Shannon, why don't you tell them just what we do when we make this sound to make it sound just like a predator attack?
What we do when we move into an area in the wood is find us a little branchy bush. As we will get down in a kneeling position, and we'll take our bush and we'll slap it on the ground hard 3 times in conjunction with sucking this whistle 5 consecutive times. Everywhere we go, people will say, well, what does a bush do? The bush imitates the flapping of a hawk's wing. The more noise you make with this bush, the better off you'll be. It sounds just like a hawk has grabbed a young squirrel and he's making all kind of noise when he's killing it.
That's right, Shannon. The more noise you make with the bush, the better. It seems like you attract the squirrel's attention a little bit more. But just to recap what you said and to explain to everybody how to use this thing, the best results we have is when we suck the whistle 5 consecutive times. The first whistle being just a little bit longer than the following 4, kind of trailing it off as you make the 5 whistles, and it sounds just like this. The bush should be struck against the ground 3 times in conjunction with the first 3 calls, and it sounds like this. In other words, what we are doing is we have the bush with the first 3 whistles. The last 2 whistles are without the bush, so the sound that the baby squirrel would make will carry further.
Well, Jerry, is there any particular rhythm or time for the whistle to be sucked upon?
Yes, there is. Like I was saying, the first whistle is a little longer than the following 4. I'd say the first whistle should last about 3/4 of a second, with the following 4 whistles lasting about a ½ second each. The total time for the 5 whistles should be about 3.5 to 4 seconds.
Now, what if you're in an area and you can't find a suitable bush?
Well, there will be a very few times that you couldn't find a bush to shake. But if you're hunting in a pin oak flat, there has been times that I've gotten a little limb and raked it across the ground and made the same call and had squirrels to bark. In some situations, I've actually taken my hunting cap and slapped across my leg and made the same call and had squirrels to bark. It doesn't work quite as well as a bush, but it will work.
Oh, okay, Shannon. Now, say you're in a good-looking hunting area and you call one time and swatted the bush against the ground, but nothing happens. Well, now what do you do?
If you don't hear any squirrels barking, what I would do is wait about 15 or 20 seconds and go through the same call again. If nothing goes to barking then, I assume there's nothing in the area. On a still day, a squirrel can hear this call about 100 yards. I'll pick up and move probably about 75 to 100 yards and make the same call again.
Okay, well, now, Jerry, what are the best times to use the Mr. Squirrel whistle, now that we know how to use the whistle?
When we hunt with Mr. Squirrel whistle, we get into the woods just before or just at daylight, as you would normally if you're going to go squirrel hunting. At first light, squirrels are beginning to move out of their nest and into their feeding areas. This period of the day, we don't use the Mr. Squirrel whistle because squirrels are active, and if there's any in your area, they're easy to spot anyway. The best results are when the squirrels have moved to their feeding areas, or if you wanted to time it, about 30 or 45 minutes after sunup.
That's right. A lot of times your squirrel hunters will hunt till about 9:30 or 10 o'clock. After this, your squirrels are full and laid up. Your squirrel hunters then will probably be ready to go home. But with the Mr. Squirrel whistle, I've been out a lot of times at noon and got my limit.
Well, in other words, what you're saying, Shannon, is when the average squirrel hunter thinks the morning hunt is over, yours, with the Mr. Squirrel whistle, can still be very productive.
That's right, Walt. A lot of times I've gone out at 12 o'clock and killed my limit of squirrels.
Well then, Jerry, describe for us a squirrel hunt using a Mr. Squirrel whistle and say it's a clear day and we have very little, if any, wind.
Okay, I get into the woods, say, just before daylight and quietly move into an area where I believe there's going to be some good squirrel hunting. I'll hunt by sight and sound for the first 30 or 45 minutes after daylight, and I'll probably kill a couple of squirrels. By that time, the squirrels are becoming less active and are harder to spot.
Now, that's when you break out the Mr. Squirrel whistle and start looking for a suitable bush?
That's right. I'll call and swat the bush against the ground as we described earlier. If nothing happens, I'll wait 15 or 20 seconds and do the same thing again. If I get no response the second time, I assume that there are no squirrels within hearing, and I'll move to another area.
Now, how far do you move, Jerry?
Well, that depends on how good the area looks and the wind and rain conditions or some other factors. As we said earlier, on a still day, about 100 yards. If the wind's blowing or it's raining or has rained, the sound won't carry as far as it would on a good day. Normally on a still day, I'll move only about 75 to 100 yards before I call again. As I go from one location to another, I'll use the same type of movements. I'm talking about slow, careful type movements that I would use if I was squirrel hunting without the squirrel collar. You don't want to alarm the squirrels to your presence.
Well, since the Mr. Squirrel whistle produces an angry or an excited response, Shannon, I would imagine at times you'd have more than one squirrel barking at you.
Yes, there's a lot of times that I've had 6 or 8 squirrels barking at one time.
Well, what do you do in an instance like that?
Well, if I had 6 or 8 squirrels barking at one time, what I would do is bag the closest one first and then go around and kill the rest of them. But if by any chance that I kill 4 or 5 and the others had quit barking, what I would do is go ahead and make my call, and 9 times out of 10, the other ones that had quit barking would go back to barking and I could make my kill.
That's right. It's really a simple procedure. You kill the squirrels that are barking that are close by, and if for some reason from your shooting or whatever, the squirrels that were barking quit, just make the call again, and 9 times out of 10, they'll start back barking again.
There have been a lot of times that I have killed my limit and still had squirrels in the woods barking.
Oh, okay, Shannon. Then let's say you're moving to another area and you spook a squirrel before you see him. Now, he's hidden up in a tree or he runs into a hole.
Well, if a squirrel runs into a hole, he's pretty scared. But I have taken a limb and rubbed up the side of the tree and hit my call, and sometimes you'll bring the squirrel out of the hole. But if he don't come out of the hole, you've got nothing to lose. I would try it anyway.
Well, now, what if you're lucky enough to have a good squirrel dog or hunting with someone with a good dog? Will the Mr. Squirrel whistle work with treed squirrels?
Yes, that's a point we need to bring out. The Mr. Squirrel whistle works great in the spring and early fall when you've got plenty foliage. Now in the dead winter, I do like to hunt with a dog. there are a lot of times that my dog will be treed and I'll go up to the tree and a squirrel will be in some vines and we can't locate it. That's when I pull out my Mr. Squirrel whistle and make my call, and the squirrel will move and give off his location before we can get a shot.
Well, that pretty well describes how to use the Mr. Squirrel whistle. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jerry?
Yes, I would, Walt. Shannon and I travel a lot of places hunting and demonstrating with this whistle, and people ask us, what kind of squirrels do the whistle work on? In our experience, everywhere we've been, whether it be fox squirrels, gray squirrels, red squirrels, or whatever, black squirrels even, it's worked on everything we've used it on. And one other thing, too, that I just want to remind people of now, when you're using the whistle, use it properly, and use it in conjunction with beating the bush against the ground or against your leg, and suck it the proper number of times, 5. As with any game caller, the more you use it, the better you will become with it.
Well, there you have it. The inside information on using the Mr. Squirrel whistle from the hunters who've spent a lot of time perfecting the whistle and how to effectively use it. Practice with it and be ready to be surprised during the squirrel season. Now, don't be tempted to kill over your limit when using the Mr. Squirrel because the game warden might be behind the next tree. Now, if you'll turn the tape over to the other side and rewind it, you'll hear a recording of an actual squirrel hunt using the Mr. Squirrel whistle. Now we're in a bottomland hardwood forest with Shannon and Jerry on a squirrel hunt using the Mr. Squirrel whistle. The sounds you'll hear during this hunt were taken from the audio track of the videotape. First, let's let Shannon and Jerry demonstrate again how to use the Mr. Squirrel whistle.
All right, how about giving us a little demonstration of the whistle and using the bush with it and kind of explain what you're doing there?
Okay, thanks. Actually, when you move into a location and you've spotted your area out and haven't seen any movement, you find your little old bush similar to this, just something that you can take your hand and wrap around right there and get wad them up in one big cluster. You look around. The way I like to do it, I like to take and squat down on my knee like this right here. Now let me bring one point out. When you're using the squirrel whistle, there's times that you're going to be holding the whistle with one hand and shaking the bush. That's the way I like to do it. But your shotgun or your gun, whatever you've got, always make sure that your safety's on and that you got your barrel point away from it. That's very important.
That's a good point.
Okay. You get down in your kneeling position. If there's any wind blowing, a lot of times wind blows in gusts. If it's blowing kind of hard, just give it a few seconds and it'll ease up. And the same way with your blue jays. You know, you've been in squirrel hunters have been in the woods when they couldn't hear nothing but blue jays. But if they give it just for a little while, they'll move on to another location. But you get down in your position like this right here. Now I'm gonna blast this whistle. Well, I'll show you right here. You come down with your bush there 3 times with your whistle, and then you let off, and then the other 2 times without the bush. That gives good clear sound, on out there.
How about doing it for us one more time?
Okay. Grab your bush. Come in with your whistle.
Okay, Shannon, I think that'll help a lot of the people to understand exactly how you're making the call.
Well, it's got to sound like it to make it work.
Now we'll move into an area where they believe there are some squirrels.
See if here's a good area. There's a tree there and try.
We're now in a promising looking area. Shannon's found a good bush and is about to blow the whistle. Now listen for the almost immediate response from a squirrel. Now we're moving to a different spot, and Shannon has located a good bush to use. So this time we're going to bag this squirrel. Now there are times when a squirrel will not bark at all, but will come through the trees directly to the call. Now this happens with young squirrels mostly. Now listen.
I see him. He's coming this way. You see him right out. He's coming on this way. Watch him. Let him come on. Let him come on. Yeah, there. You see him here on that limb? See him on it, Brad? Can you see him in the open spot yonder? And he goes up towards the tree. Right there on that limb, man. Got it on it? Okay. Take him, Shannon. Take him. Okay, he's going to get it. That's a good one. Put it in that photo. Yeah. Trigger said He's coming on to us. Is he a young one, Shannon? Is he young?
Yeah, that's the reason he just moved toward a location that didn't bark much. He's just a young squirrel.
That's a pretty one, though, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of times your real young squirrels, they'll move to you just like he did. He came right to us, you know, and he just, you know, they won't bark because, see, this squirrel here he was born in March.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when they're that young, they what they'll do is they'll just move to you. See, he started way over young and just kept on coming and, you know, just within killing range.
Well, that's the best deal. Didn't think you get one to come to you.
That's what I like about this whistle.
Now on this next one, the squirrel immediately responded to the whistle very excitedly and moved toward the hunter. In fact, the squirrel moved so close that he was just above Jerry, who had the videotape camera, and Shannon couldn't shoot. Now let's listen to what happened. We're going to call one more time, but this time we'll have several squirrels in the distance respond, and we'll have to move toward them. Shannon will bag one of these. Now, these squirrels are about 100 yards away, so Shannon and Jerry are having to move toward them. The squirrels bark most of the time while they're moving. That allows the two hunters to pinpoint their locations.
Do you see him? Yeah, there's two of them, but this one's real close. He's just right up above us right here.
You want to go and take him? Let me see if I can get in position to see him.
Okay, you get to where you see him, I'm gonna take him. Come around here. Looking right at us right there. Come on, you two, get ready.
Well, there you have it. The Mr. Squirrel squirrel whistle in actual use. We hope you'll practice with the squirrel whistle and use it, and we know you'll be happy with the results.